I'm Renee Richard, host of Roots of Faith. Today we're visiting St. Francis Xavier Parish here in downtown Baton Rouge. This parish, the church sits literally right against the interstate, and I-10 played a major role in the sustainability and in the life of this parish, as you're going to find out. But this is a very unique parish. It's one of 6 within our diocese that we consider a non-territorial parish. And what we mean by that is that there are no physical boundaries as to if you live within this area, you belong to this parish. This is one of our African American parishes, one of 3 within the city of Baton Rouge. There's St. Francis Xavier, we have St. Paul of Baton Rouge, and we have Immaculate Conception in Scotlandville within the city that are non-territorial for the African American community and anyone else that may want to be a parishioner here. The other 3 are in the outlying areas of the diocese. We have St. Catherine in Donaldsonville. We have St. Benedict the Moor in Batonville, or Napoleonville is their mailing address. That are also, the third one is St. Augustine, however you pronounce it, in New Roads. If you're French, you pronounce it different from the rest of us. Those are our 6 non-territorial parishes. And besides that making this parish so unique, this is one of the ones that's run by the Josephites, and they are known for ministering to the African Americans. It was founded on hard-working families that moved to this area in 1918. They've had 100 years of sustainability here, and down to the point where there were even parishioners here that were known as the mechanics, because every bit of the church, every building here was done with volunteer labor, about 99% of it from parishioners that were here. And some of these families have literally been working church work for the whole 100 years. When this parish started here, for instance, Mr. Lee Baton was one of the mechanics, and for years did work here, as well as the Immaculate Conception in Scotlandville and over in Lakeland. And his grandson now does all the maintenance and carpentry work and general woodworking skills at St. Agnes. So we see generations that are still here, or still within these communities. So join us as we explore the uniqueness of St. Francis Xavier. I have as my guest today Father Edward Chiffriller. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Pastor here at St. Francis Xavier Parish. Welcome to the show. And tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how long have you been here?
Okay, I was ordained a Josephite priest in 1974, and I came here to St. Francis in 2011, so I'm in my 9th year.
Awesome, very good. This parish is one of our, what we call a non-territorial parish, so there's no boundaries in terms of the physical graphics, but tell us a little bit about the demographics of the people. How many parishioners do you have here?
We have about 530 registered parishioners. St. Francis was established in 1918, and we celebrated our centennial last year. So it was the first African-American parish in Baton Rouge, and African-American Catholics in South Baton Rouge used to at first worship at St. Joseph's Church, and then when St. Agnes Chapel was built, they worshiped there, but they always, in both places, it was under segregated circumstances. So they wanted to establish their own church. So in 1918, the Josephites were invited to come and establish St. Francis Xavier.
And it's always been under the Josephites'
Yes,
administration throughout its entire time, correct?
Right, yes.
That's it. And what we often tell our viewers, Baton Rouge was this little tiny town on the river, really, throughout the 1800s, the first 100 years of its existence. And so there was a distance to travel if you were living in the outlying area, and it was small to begin with. And it wasn't until St. George was established in 1908, but where St. Agnes, now we think of that as being so close, but this was the outskirts of town at the time. So it was a distance they had to come in, through muddy roads to get to St. Joseph's.
Yeah.
you know.
So it was more convenient, and the parishioners worked hard to build the first church, and then in 1920, the school was established, and the Holy Family Sisters staffed the school.
With the African Americans of this community being part of St. Agnes, you know, there was a resentment there, and that they were these backdoor Catholics. They really wanted their own parish, and so with the help of prominent people like Dr. Barranca and his sister, Miss Leon Barranca, they were some of the ones that really pushed the movement to establish their own, and they felt confident they could support a church, which they could. Part of the draw of people moving to Baton Rouge and the growth of Baton Rouge had to do with Exxon coming in. In the 1890s, you had Coca-Cola that came in, so you started to see that growth begin. But really, Exxon in 1908 was the big move, and since Exxon had established itself along the River Road just north of Baton Rouge, this is the area that we saw growing so much.
Yeah.
So, and that had a lot to do with it. So a lot of the founding families from here came from the surrounding areas, from more rural areas that wanted a better life. A lot of the founding families here were from Point Capee Parish. Mm-hmm. So you see Ricards and DeQuirs and LaCours, Bourgeois, some of those family names that we see in the old record books of Point Capee, Lakeland, were founding families here.
Yes.
And were instrumental in both the school and the parish, you know, getting off the ground. And it's had a lot of struggles, but it's been the parishioners. I think they built the first church. I mean, hand-built that very first church. And probably this one helped with this one as well in many ways.
And it's a long history of families in the parish that go back to the very beginning, and the children who attended our school. And even though most of our parishioners do not live in the neighborhood, they live in all parts of Baton Rouge on this side and also the west side of the bridge. But they come back because this is where the roots of their faith grew, both in the church and in the school.
The families that were here, as you said, you know, they come and they stay, even though they don't live close by necessarily. But those families built the very first church that was here, that was built in 1918, and it was on the same property. As you may know or may not know, the interstate passes literally right by here. And what ended up happening is they had built the school, they had even established a high school, and within 6 years, I-10 was planned to go right through, and did go within 10 feet of that first church that they had built. And it undermined the stability of the church, and it literally tore down the high school, which was never able to have been rebuilt. So that church, which was just on the same property but nearer to the interstate, was reinforced. They redid it twice before this church was built in 1977. Again, the architect for this church, when they were interviewing architects, they took the first person that they had a bid from. It was a Mr. Dupree. He was local, and they loved the idea of what he had to present them about their heritage in this church and the design of this church. So this church was constructed in 1977, and it's been, I know you said you had done some changes to it, flooring and stuff recently.
Yeah, in preparation for the centennial of the church, we had a fundraiser to replace both the pews and the flooring in the church. So that has improved both the aesthetics of the church and also provided us an opportunity in preparation for the centennial to renovate the inside of the church.
But just as the families had a role in that first church, it was a parishioner that even the statues that are in here, it was a local parishioner that gave the specifications. They were done in Italy, and they're carved out of linden wood, but he indicated literally like even which direction the fingers might point or how he wanted them done. and they were made to fit this church specifically, down to how they were painted, the color they were painted, and everything. So you've got some really unique statuary in here. The original cross is no longer behind the altar. It's actually still here in the church with a newer one that was brought in at a more modern time from another pastor. The altar, though, is original to this church, also having been constructed of a type of very hardwood, laminated wood with Alpha and Omega on the front. The focal point was the tabernacle and its beauty, which was also stipulated by the architect, that from the 5 entrances of this church, you see it immediately. So there's a lot of beautiful artwork that's here in this church in terms of its physical structure. It's a very simple box, but set like at an angled design. The Stations of the Cross are also beautifully done and blend in with everything, and the stained glass here is really, really beautiful. The one over the altar, especially because of what's depicted in it, going back to the heritage of this church, you see carpenter's tools. So many of these men were carpenters, master carpenters, that did so much of the work around here. They would call them mechanics by one of the former pastors, because they did this free on their own time to sustain this parish in whatever aspect was needed throughout the years, whether it was the rectory, the early schools, the first church, the renovations, you name it. They were instrumental in it. So you see their carpenter's tools depicted in the stained glass window. Music has always been an integral part of the African American community, and with beautiful voices and beautiful talent, that is depicted in the stained glass as well. So it really does. When I walked in, that's the first thing that jumped out at me, because I didn't research this in a book. It was very evident to me from researching the history of this parish, seeing the stained glass windows here.
And also the parishioners, soon after St. Francis was established, they reached out to North Baton Rouge, and as a mission, Immaculate Conception was established from here and also staffed from here until it became an independent parish. Yeah.
Another mission here was Immaculate Conception in Plaquemine in the 1940s, and it was made an independent parish, although it's closed now. Yeah. So that just gives you some idea of the distance to which the people traveled to be part of St. Francis.
And the Josephites were part of that, expansion and also evangelization of African American Catholics.
Tell us about some of the ministries that are here at St. Francis.
Sure. As you mentioned, part of our heritage as an African American parish is gospel music, and we have a very strong music ministry. We have a gospel choir, we have a contemporary choir, we have a youth gospel choir, and a men's choir. So there's a lot of activity in terms of enhancing worship by gospel music, and so we're very proud of the music ministry. We also have a food pantry that distributes food to people in the community every Thursday from 10 to 12, so that's a good outreach. And the traditional parish ministries of ministers of the word, extraordinary ministers of communion, ministers of hospitality, and so forth. So it's pretty much like every other parish, but our parishioners are very dedicated to the ministries that they choose to be a part of.
And I know I got to work with some of your parishioners. Y'all celebrated 100 years as a parish just last year, and even did like a cookbook sale.
We did.
And so they came together to put that together. They made ornaments to sell and clothing to sell to raise money, and that's been their history in the past. They would go up and down with not so much fairs, but with fundraising events to support this church. Right. So I got to see firsthand and purchase one of the cookbooks, and it's amazing.
In fact, they just brought to my attention that in the issue of the commentator, the Christmas issue, that 4 of the recipes from that cookbook were included in that Christmas section of the Catholic commentator. So they were very proud of that as well. But the parishioners are very dedicated, they're hardworking, and they're very committed and loyal to the church, and so it makes my ministry as pastor very easy because of the good people that are here.
We were talking about your parishioners and ministries, but do you have any upcoming events that are on the horizon for this parish?
Yes, we're planning. We have a centennial school committee that is planning events for the opening of the centennial year for the school, and the opening mass is on Sunday, January the 12th at 10:30. We're going to have one mass on that Sunday, and Bishop John Ricard, who is the Superior General of the Josephites and who is from this parish.
Right.
He graduated from both the high school and the elementary school. He'll be the celebrant and the homilist, so we're looking forward to that. And then we're going to have a luncheon in the Catholic Life Center after the Mass.
Oh, great.
And so that'll kick off the events of the centennial year for our school, and we'll conclude it in December of 2020.
Great. Well, thank you so much for talking with me about St. Francis Parish. And now we're going to roll over and talk to the principal of the school about what's going on with the school.
Great.
I have as my guest now Paula Johnson. Paula is the principal at St. Francis Xavier School, and Father Chiffriller wanted to make sure that we covered the school, being it's celebrating its 100th anniversary just next month, right?
Yes, we start our 100th anniversary on January 12th with a 10:30 Mass, followed by a reception over at the Catholic Life Center.
That's it. So the school actually began in 1920, St. Francis Xavier. It was the first parochial Catholic school for African Americans in the city of Baton Rouge. But the history of education for African Americans, especially African American girls, went back much further to 1881 when the Sisters of the Holy Family, and that is an order that is local. They were founded in New Orleans by Henriette DeLille. Came here in order to minister to young women, and so they had a school. It was located where the post office is on Main Street now, and it didn't last for very long because of prejudice. They closed the school, and I believe the Sisters of St. Joseph reopened it for several years. But then when St. Francis was established in 1918, the Sisters of the Holy Family returned the following year to establish a parochial school. And they are actually we still have the Sisters of the Holy Family teaching here, correct?
Yes, we have three sisters living here and two sisters teaching here, Sister Joseph Ellen Cavalier and Sister Rosalind Babineau. And so they have been teaching here for a few years. And we're really glad to have them here. We're very fortunate that we still have two nuns actually teaching on the campus.
There are so many schools here and so many that we've interviewed, but they no longer have, the presence of religious in the school in this capacity. And one of the things that's unique here is that the school building, we'll talk more about the school, but the school building itself, the nuns live, their convent is located on the second floor of the school building. And they even have a chapel in there that's really beautiful. And we taped a TV show there once about Henriette DeLille because their stained glass windows depict her life, if I remember correctly.
If you get a chance to see it, and I'm not sure if you are going to go up there.
We will.
It is so beautiful, and it is so peaceful and such a quaint place to just sit down and pray and have just a moment of peace.
That's it. Now, as part of the school, are the students allowed in it or the faculty allowed in it? I'm just curious.
The faculty can go up and pray if they choose to. Typically, we don't carry students there. We have Mass here in the church. Yes, very small. It's a small, quaint chapel.
That's it. Okay, so let's talk about the school. You've been there how long now?
This is my second year here at St. Francis. We have now about 140 kids. It's a small school. We have kindergarten through 8th grade. For the academic programs, our kids participate in National Junior Beta. We're participating in the AR program. We have a very active athletic program. We've had, for the first time this year, 2 girls teams, and now we are into 3 little boys teams, and so we'll have games all this weekend, I'm told. So,
that's awesome.
So it's really exciting to have them actively engaged in not only the academic component, but also the athletic component.
I'm just curious, what are the school colors and what's their mascot?
We are the Mustangs, and the school
Okay.
colors are it's like a royal blue and a gold.
Okay.
And so, and it's been that for years. However, at the beginning of the school, it's my understanding that the school colors were green. Now, the kids wear green uniforms, and so
Okay.
that was a really interesting conversation with some of our former students that, well, where did the change occur? And so that was really interesting because in the original pictures, the uniforms were green, and at some point they were red, but now for the last 20 years, they've been the same color.
Okay, interesting. What about parental involvement? Do y'all have a lot of parents that are active within the school? Every school is so different.
Every school is different, and in this school we have our core group of parents. I imagine like every other school you can call them at any time, but we also have parents who always support us with extended field trips that will always show up. We have parents who will just call and volunteer, so can I help do certain things? And so it's a variety of participation on all levels, whether depending upon their work schedule also.
Okay. When they graduate, where do most of these kids go? Because this is through 8th grade, right?
This is through 8th grade.
So I know you've only been here a short time, but what are some of the feeder schools? Are they more the magnet schools or public schools in this area? Do they
We
go to
have
some
kids going to Catholic High, St. Joseph's. We had a few applying this year, going to St. Michael's. And then they also go to Lee High School, Baton Rouge Magnet. And then since our environment, our kids come from a large environment, they could go in their home area because our kids come from 17 different zip codes. And so they may just go, we have kids that actually live in Denham that come here, and so it just depends.
Right, being a predominantly African-American school here, that was my next question. You answered it for me because they come from as far away as like Plaquemine, Gonzales.
And we have kids from Port Allen, so it's just, across the river,
Which makes for a really diverse for them in terms of, being with each other, because each of these communities
are totally different,
Well, totally different, but it brings their
culture,
home culture into the mix, which is really interesting as well. Paula, with 141 students, tell us a little bit about class size, because in some schools that's a detriment. But so, what are your
Well, our
class
class
sizes
vary. We have in a few classes as low as 12, but our largest class is 22. And
Okay,
so
so that's a
no
good
class
number.
is so large that it's overwhelming to anyone.
Right, like that 30,
No, we
31,
don't have that.
32 limit here.
Because that's not healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what about your staff that you've got here, your teachers?
We have a variety of, from younger teachers to seasoned teachers, some retired teachers that have returned to work. And we pretty much have a very stable staff. Most of the teachers that are presently here have either been here and are transferred from St. Louis when St. Louis closed down.
Okay.
As far as our clubs, we have a reach out program through our National Junior Beta where our kids, when the hurricane hit the Bahamas, our kids got together and decided that they wanted to be missionaries here for those kids.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
And independently, they raised close to, a little bit over $2,000. They even came to Mass one Sunday and they petitioned the participants,
ushers?
the
parishioners.
The parishioners here. And
another
the girls it was so interesting because the girls were trying to raise more money than the boys.
Ah,
There was
they
a
made
little
it a competition.
And so they decided to split that amount. And so the church is very generous in donating money to support one of the schools over in the Bahamas. And so we found a sister school there. And we sent funds there to help them. And so that was awesome on their part and a great learning experience. It's a way for our kids to give back to others who've experienced hurricanes. And so
Absolutely.
that was an awesome experience. We also have this year a wonderful choir. And they've sung for Mass here. They've also sung at one of the casinos at one of the religious functions. And so they will be singing actually at the Mass in January. So they're
great.
young kids and very, very, very good. So we were proud of them for that. We have, in addition to that, we offer clubs usually maybe 3 or 4 times a year, where every kid has an opportunity to participate in either photography or chess or etiquette. So we have a menu of selections, and the kids can select what they want to participate in, and the teachers are in charge of it, and they actively engage, and it's just fun going around seeing kids having fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you said you do it like 3 times a year?
3 or
Is that
4
what
times a year.
So they have an
Sometimes more often.
opportunity to really sample all of it at some point in time?
Yes, if they choose to.
If they choose to. That's amazing.
So that's where we are with our clubs. We have kids who volunteer in the morning, and we have kids who take care of our plants, and so they just do it on their own. They already know we've set that up, so that's our little gardening club. That's every day. They come and water the plants in front of the church and along the side of the school, and so it's a small school with a rich history and a rich culture where everybody really kind of nurtures everyone. So we love it.
Are a lot of these children legacies, out of curiosity? Do you have a good number of legacies that come? Do you know? You may not know that, but...
Actually, what we have in some instances, we have grandparents who have attended,
Right.
but not the kids.
Okay.
But now the grandchildren are here.
Right, so still a legacy
there's
within
still a
that
legacy,
family
yes,
coming through
We have
here.
some of that, but not necessarily, that's not our majority.
No, okay.
Yeah.
I was just curious in that line.
But we have Mass here every Friday for our staff, for our students, and regardless of whether they're Catholic or non-Catholic, they all participate in the Mass and the readings. They altar girls and boys, and so they are intrigued in our rich Catholic history and in our rituals.
And the school is on the same campus here,
The school is like 2 seconds from the
right
church.
behind us, correct? Okay, very good. St. Francis Xavier School has some boasting rights. I mean, really, this school has been in existence. It's 100 years come next month that its doors have been open. And I mean, that's a milestone. You know, so what do you feel gives it that credence? I know you've been here a short time, but, you know, that's not something to be taken lightly.
You know, 100 years is a long time, and it has to be, first of all, a grounded spirit in the belief of God and supporting that belief and having that entrenched not only in the parish but also in the school, that those combined efforts, along with the sense of where we need to go and strong academics, a collaborative spirit between the church, the school, and the parents, a history of family, of various families, a history of support in various ways. So I think all of those pieces combined continue to enable this school to exist.
That's awesome. And if you could think of a term or something that comes to mind maybe about this community, your community of children, what would be, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but, you know, is there some thoughts there as one thing that might jump out at you?
Our
a couple of
kids have a strong sense of Christ, a strong sense of belief, not only in the Catholic faith, but in God himself, as well as knowing that they have to achieve in order to be successful in life.
Awesome.
They also believe in giving back to others.
That's obvious.
And so
What you were just telling us.
I think that those pieces combined enables this school to really to continue to be successful.
And defines your kids. Awesome. Well, Paula, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to this anniversary that's coming up.
Well, we look forward to having you all here, and please come out and share and visit our school.